You may have been told you need to use a $750 Ableton Suite or a $5,700 Nord to sound good. But all you want is a step-by-step guide for setting up a keys rig that sounds great for beginners. I'm Garrett, a worship pastor who's played keys on large worship teams for over 13 years. And today I'm going to walk through a simple step-by-step guide for how to get your very first modern worship keys rig set up. It only takes 3 items and it's going to cost you less than $350. First, and most obviously, you're going to need a keyboard. But how many keys? What capabilities are actually worthwhile? What sound should it have? And what should you look for in a keyboard? If you don't already have a MIDI keyboard, these are the 3 qualities I look for in a good MIDI keyboard. First, sound capability. Most keyboards that have sounds built in already sound pretty bad. And the ones that do sound good, like the Nord for example, are super expensive. So to get a good sound without sacrificing price, the first thing I look for is a MIDI keyboard, meaning it has a USB or MIDI in-out port on the back that can connect to a laptop for reasons I'll explain in just a little bit. Secondly, for beginners, it should come with Ableton Lite for free if you don't already have Ableton. Thirdly, it should have at least 61 keys, but not be super bulky, and it should have at least 4 knobs and 4 faders, for reasons again which I'll explain in just a little bit. Now, the Oxygen Pro 61 and the Novation Launchkey 61 are both 2 great MIDI keyboards that fit all of the above criteria. They're both around $300, they come with Ableton Live Lite, and they have more than enough knobs and faders for adjusting your tone. So getting a great keyboard like one of those 2 uses the bulk of our budget, and that leaves us $50 still. Now, to put it simply, most cheap keyboards and keyboard sounds sound pretty bad. So it'd be nice if we could find something to turn a cheap keyboard into a really expensive grand piano or a vintage synthesizer with our remaining $50. That's where our second item comes in. You need a program like MainStage or Ableton. Now, both these programs do similar things. MainStage is marketed to beginners a lot, but I personally prefer to get into Ableton right away because you can start simple and the program can grow with you. All the big worship teams like Bethel and Upper Room use Ableton, and you want to learn on a program that you can grow with and that gives you the capability and functionality that you need long term. Thankfully, Ableton Lite comes free with either of the MIDI keyboards I suggested, so this item is going to be $0. Now, if you already have a keyboard and you didn't have to purchase a keyboard, you could also just get the Ableton Intro Edition for $100 on Ableton's website. So that's another great option if you already have your own MIDI keyboard. Now, we still have $50 and we have Ableton, but what sounds are we going to use? And how do you make the sounds? This is the third item in the worship keys rig and one of the most important steps, and I'll give you 2 options for how to do this. One is going to take a lot more work but is free, and the other is no work and costs $25. For the free method, here are the steps. We're going to dig through the sounds in Ableton, and we're going to find a great piano sound that you love, and then we're going to find a way to adjust its tone from mellow to bright. So if you just opened Ableton and you're trying to set up your tone, you probably have 2 MIDI channels here. We don't need the audio channels, I'll delete those. And let's work with our MIDI. We're going to start with a piano tone to try to find a piano tone that we really like. So open instruments over here. We're going to open instrument rack, and you'll see all the different instruments you have in Ableton. I have a lot of instruments already in here. If you just have Ableton Lite, you will probably see a lot less instruments. That's okay, just look through the instruments you have. For a piano tone, normally there's a piano key section already. You can start digging through those and see what you think. Let's start to listen to some of these. Not quite what we're going for. Let's try another one. And you can mess with all of these tones. Like you can see, we've got a filter cutoff. Makes it a lot brighter, a lot warmer. How much space is there? So you can play with a lot of these tones, and as you start adjusting, try to find a piano that you really think would work well with the worship context. Next, I would start to search for a pad tone that you like. So again, we have this next MIDI track, and let's start to look for sounds for that. A lot of times for pads, I like to look for strings or synths and then filter them down. That way, in big moments, we can sound really bright, but then low moments, we can soften it up to a nice, warm, lush pad. So here's some synths, see what they sound like. Pads can often take longer even than piano to find something you really like. Let's look at some pads over here. That sounds alright. I still don't love it, but it sounds okay. Dialing in a great tone can take some time. Now, to many beginners, all of what I just went through might be overwhelming to get going, and it can take a long time to dial in a sound that you love in a worship context. That brings me to the much easier $25 option, which is to buy an Ableton template with preloaded instrument racks so that you don't have to dig through hundreds of bad sounds just to find one sort of good one. It's essentially done all of the hard work for you in creating the tone and crafting tones that fit well in a modern worship context. The thing is, you can hardly hardly ever find templates for Ableton Lite, which is the program that comes with a lot of MIDI keyboards and is more beginner-friendly Ableton version. Because of that, I built one specifically for beginners who have never used a computer in worship before and just want some great tones that they can drag in really quickly. It has a grand piano that I can adjust the tone of to really warm like this. But I could also brighten up to more of an upright sound for bigger moments if I wanted to stand out in the mix. But if I bring it to about 50%, it's also just a really great piano sound. And it also has a pad which can filter. Again, I'll emphasize this pad. I can filter this up. And I can also filter it down for low moments. You can hear how nice it sounds to filter down. And for good beginners, you could just stop there for now and really get used to those two instruments and filtering your pad and piano. Now I also included some important extras like an octave piano that activates when you hit the keys hard. And that fills in big moments really well. And I also included a synth for lead lines on big choruses and bridges. I also have a spot where you can drag in worship backing pad to fill in the space between song transitions and to overall smooth out an entire set. And I have some worship backing pads for free on my website. You could click the link in the comments. My Worship 101 video goes in depth about how beginners can use each of these sounds in a typical worship song. One note I did want to make, when you actually bring this keys setup to church on a Sunday morning to play, you will also need what is called an audio interface. This is simply a device that converts your computer's audio in a way that the church sound system can make sound great. So you won't need one at home unless you're wanting to do some home recording, but you will need one at church. If you talk to your church, a lot of times they may already have one or would be willing to buy one for your church piano players to use. If you'd like your own, the U8 Volt is a great option at only $175, and you could also use it if you ever decide to do your own home recording or podcasting. So I mentioned how these keys tones can really take you to the next level, but tools can only go so far as the player using them. So even the greatest tone doesn't help if you aren't prepared to play your parts with a worship team come Sunday morning, which brings us to our next area of focus, how to prepare for Sunday. Watch the next video and I'll walk through the specific steps that you should go through in order to be able to crush it Sunday with your brand new epic keys setup.